Yeah, I apologize. We have a very small.
Good evening, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? Even in the far back? Can y'all hear me? Awesome. Okay. My name is Vanessa Paulson. I want to say welcome. I'm so glad to see you all. You braved. Did anybody hit rain? Crazy weather? A little bit. Me too. Did it clear up for you by the time you walked in? That was an answered prayer. Just saying. Here. So for those of you watching online, I want to say welcome to you as well. Please participate. For those of you that are online, all of you have cards as well. I'd love for you to participate tonight. You've got lots of handouts when you walked in, so you are very much prepared and supplied. Before we get started, I would like to invite Catherine Del Conte up. She is our regional captain for the Piedmont area. And she is going to open us up tonight in a word of prayer. So, Catherine, if you would do that for me, that'd be great.
Use my preacher voice if I need to. Let's pray. Father, you've told us in your word, in 1 Timothy 2, 1 through 3, I exhort, therefore, that first of all, supplications, prayers, intercessions, and giving of thanks be made for all men, for kings, and for all that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. For this is good and acceptable in the sight of God our Savior. Father, we thank you for your word. We thank you that you direct us on who to pray for and how to pray and what to pray. And that it is our duty to pray for godly men and women that are in authority and for those that are not godly. Because you've said that our prayer is acceptable to you. So we intercede on behalf of those that don't know you yet. And we know that you accept our prayer. We thank you, Father, for each of those in this room tonight and every family member that they represent. That those that are coming together to do your work, that are gathered together to do your work, are the ones that are the remnant. We thank you, Lord, that you've given us direction. We thank you that you're here tonight with us. And we pray it all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. If I could have Mr. Wayne Stanley make his way to the front. Oh, there you are. Come on up. So, Mr. Wayne Stanley, where should I bring my... Mr. Wayne Stanley is our lead follow-up team, or the follow-up team leader, and he is retired Army Sergeant Major in the U.S. Army for 26 years in logistics. So he's done a fantastic job with our follow-up team, and you have probably heard from him at some point or another as a welcome. So he does a great job, and he's going to do our pledge for us tonight.
When you registered this evening, you received a handout titled United States Flag Code, which explains why you should not pause after the words "One Nation" when citing the Pledge of Allegiance. In many of our prayers, we ask God to be with us and our country and guide us into our endeavors to save our great nation. But for the most part, when we recite the Pledge of Allegiance, we separate the nation and God by pausing after the words "One Nation." On Flag Day 1954, the words "under God" were added after "One Nation" without punctuation. This means that "One Nation under God" should be recited as one continuous thought without a pause after "One Nation." If there is a pause after "One Nation," the question would be, what about one nation and or what is under God? Pausing in the middle of the "One Nation under God" basically separates our nation and God, which is what the left has been trying to do for decades. Let's not help them. Please do not pause after the "One Nation." If you all will stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. encourage everybody to take this information back to your own organizations and see if you can apply the same results, because I'm sure that almost every organization with the COS have good information.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Winstanley. If you have volunteered, I see lots of supporters in here. Some faces I don't recognize and some faces I do. If you have volunteered maybe as a telepatriot, or maybe as at an event, maybe you've done a gun show or helped us with a table. If you have made phone calls for us or done block walking, if you've done any of those things with Convention States, would you stand up for me, please? Let's give them a hand. This organization, this endeavor takes a lot of work. And so I want to say thank you to you guys that take the time to make the effort. For all of you that are here tonight, thank you for coming out. That takes effort as well, and we appreciate it. Do we have any candidates visiting tonight? If you're running for office in any form or fashion, would you stand up for me? We would like to recognize you. I see Mr. Dennis Riddell back there. Can you tell us who you are, where you're from, and what seat you're running for?
Dennis Riddell from Alamance County, running for House District number 64 again.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, sir. So you'll be hearing a little bit more from him later. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Jeff Blow. He has put this whole thing on tonight. So, and I just want to say he's an answer to prayer. Many of you are an answer to prayer. We've prayed for you guys, and we've seen the Lord do amazing things. He was given, as well as another person I see, pretty much a death sentence not that long ago. And he's here standing with us now in remission, and we're praising the Lord for it. Thank you for putting this night together.
How's everybody doing? Great. Got to get this thing started here. So the main event here is going to be a panelist discussion with Rick Santorum, Senator Rick Santorum, Dennis Riddell, and Vanessa. But before we do that, I just want to kind of start off and give you a really brief primer on COS. So COS basics. Many of you probably know this. It's repetitive for some. But there may be some new people in here, so I just want to kind of give you a grounding in what this is all about. Fundamentally, what we're about is the fact that the federal government is out of control. I don't think anyone, whether they agree with what we're doing or don't agree with what we're doing, can argue with that statement. There's too much power focused on at the federal level. So the founders, in their infinite wisdom, gave us all kinds of checks and balances. Up on the screen, it may be a little hard for you to read if you've got your pocket constitution. There are a few copies out in the lobby. We'll go through quickly Article 5, because that's really what we're talking about. It's a tool the founders gave us to help us rein in the federal government. And basically, if you look at Article 5, Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution. So that's one way we can get amendments to the Constitution. That's been done 27 times. But it goes on. Or, on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, that's 34 today, shall call a convention for proposing amendments. So that's the second way we can get amendments. Many people don't know about this second way. And then it goes on and says, which in either case shall be valid for all intents and purposes when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, either by conventions in the states or ratification by the state legislatures. I think all but one amendment, has been ratified by state legislatures. I think there's one amendment, 21st Amendment, I think, that was ratified by the state convention. So those are the two ways that we can get amendments to the Constitution, and in either case, they're proposed amendments. Whether they come from Congress or they come from a convention, they're only proposed amendments. Excuse me, they still go back out to the states for ratification in both cases. The founders gave us this tool, particularly the second part, on the second to last day of the convention, because in particular George Mason, the great anti-federalist, was concerned about that the Constitution gave Congress the right to amend it, but he questioned whether if the federal government ever got out of control, he wanted we the people to have the right to bypass Congress, and that's how we got this part of Article 5. So basically there are two processes. Proposed amendments come out of Congress. So a proposed amendment has to go through it's approved by 2/3 in the House and 2/3 of the Senate, and then it gets sent back out to the states for ratification, either by state legislatures or a convention. The second process, which is what we're talking about, is amendments are proposed by a convention of states called at the request of 2/3 of the states, or 34 states. And again, those are proposed amendments. There's nothing different. They're proposed amendments. They have to be sent out to the states for ratification, just like in the first process. So basically, 34 states submit applications. The application is very important. In North Carolina, our application is HJR 235. There's some copies out on the tables out there if you want it, or you can go to the legislative website. HJR 235 is the application, and it basically defines the scope for the convention, which allows the convention to debate amendments on term limits for federal officials, fiscal restraints, and reducing the power and the scope of the federal government. Those are the three topic areas that the convention can debate. 19 states have passed that resolution. In North Carolina, this is our 4th legislative session. We passed in the House last year, and we're now stuck in the Senate, which is one of the reasons that we're here. In Senate District 36, the local senator, Eddie Settle, has not committed to supporting Convention of States, so that's why we're in Wilkesboro for this town hall. So it's very important. All these applications that have been passed in 19 states have been exactly the same. The one in North Carolina will be exactly the same. It's important to what's called aggregate all those applications once we get to 34 states. So once we get to 34 states, by Article 5, Congress has to call the convention. That's their role. At that point, it's a state-led process. All 50 states choose delegates to the convention. These are well-established rules. We've been doing it for long before our founding era in terms of choosing delegates to various conventions and commissions and so forth. So the state legislatures choose those delegates. They send them to the convention. They are given what's called a commission, which is a legal binding term based on the resolution. That's what they're authorized to go talk about at this convention. It's just like when you hire an insurance agent for your car, you're giving them the right to insure your car. You're not giving them the right to go out and sell your house. It's a legally binding type of term called a commission. Once they get to that convention, they debate amendments based on the resolution, and it's a simple majority vote. It's a one state, one vote rule. It's always been that way. So 26 states have to approve any amendment that comes out of that convention, but then the amendments have to go back out to the states for ratification. So 38 states then have to turn around and ratify anything that comes out of that convention, just like they have to ratify anything that comes out of Congress. The reason the founders gave us is that to be able to go around Congress and get amendments that Congress will never do on their own. Why would they do term limits? Right? I happen to be a registered Republican. Republicans talk a lot about term limits. They know it's never going to happen because Republicans, and Senator Santorum is going to talk about this, they're vested in big government just like the Democrats are. That's the bottom line, right? So I always say when I got my Republican hat on, my GOP hat, it's about electing good people, and I will always vote Republican. When I come over to the other side of the podium and put my COS hat, I don't trust them any more than I do Democrats. All right, so that's, and then 38 states ratify the amendment, then it becomes part of the Constitution. All right, so now, really, you don't want to hear me anymore. What you really want to hear are people like Senator Santorum. So what I'd like to do now is introduce our three panelists tonight. And the first is former Senator Rick Santorum. You saw him on the video when you came in. He was at our rally earlier this year. Senator Santorum was a Pennsylvania senator from 1995 through 2007. The last 6 years, he was the third-ranking Republican during that time. Of course, ran for president in 2012. He's now a COS senior advisor, travels the country. He's been to North Carolina several times, traveling the country to to advocate for COS in state legislatures in particular, because he can sit down and talk to legislators. He is a legislator. He has been a legislator. He's also a Newsmax commentator. I don't know. I watch Newsmax. See Senator Santorum all the time there, always looking for his COS button on his back. So, big warm welcome for Senator Santorum. Is North Carolina Representative Dennis Riddell. Dennis, if you can come on up here. As he mentioned, he's running for, I guess this would be your 7th term, I guess, right? So he's been in the legislature for 6 terms in House District 64. It's basically Almanance County. Dennis, we at COS have met a lot of legislators in the course of the last 8 years working on this, in the last 4 legislative sessions. And I have to tell you, I think without a doubt, Dennis Riddell is in that top tier. There's only a few legislators that I really would provide the accolades like I would Representative Riddell. He's been a stalwart supporter of Convention of States since the very beginning. He's always been the primary sponsor. Probably not very many. He attended both COS simulations, the one just last year in 2023, and I can't remember, 2016 was the first one, so he attended both of those. Navy Reserve from 1978 to 1988, and I don't think his wife Polly is here. That's the real heart behind the man there. Polly is his legislative assistant, and that's who you will talk to when you call or see walk into Dennis's office in the legislature. So I want to welcome, really appreciate Dennis coming out. This is a tough time of year for legislators running for office. They have a lot of demands on their time right now, so we really appreciate Dennis coming out and his support of COS for many, many years. The final panelist is Vanessa Paulson. You already met Vanessa. She's the state director for the last, so when did you become state director? About a year ago, year and a half? Yes. So Vanessa, we're all volunteers in the state. It's an all-volunteer organization. The state director role is the most challenging, most time-consuming, and you never can satisfy everybody, can you, Vanessa? So we really appreciate Vanessa's role here at Convention of States, as we do all the volunteers across the state. Okay. So what I'd like to do to begin with is just give each one of them a chance for some opening statements, 5-10 minutes each, and then what I really wanted to get to is the Q&A part of the session. So actually, I missed something that I wanted to mention. When you checked in, you got some 3x5 cards and some pencils. So as we're going through the content, or if you already have questions, start jotting those down on the cards. If you need more cards, raise your hand and get somebody standing next. Simon and some others, can you guys, if somebody needs cards, can you get them more cards and pencils if they need them? So jot down your questions. Try to keep it fairly succinct and keep those, and then at an appropriate time, I'll ask you to pass them to some volunteers and we'll collate all those and try to get rid of duplicates and so forth, and bring those up when we do the Q&A, okay? Of course, you've already presumably found the restrooms if you need them. We've got coffee and drinks and some snacks in the back if you need them. The other thing, 2 other things to mention is when you came in, if you hadn't signed the petition already, you can sign the petition. You did get an agenda when you checked in. And actually, it's got a QR code on the bottom of it that you can sign the petition that way as well. But there is a table out in the lobby as well with a lot of material and folks that can answer any questions for you after the fact. I'm just going to turn this off for now to the shower. The other thing too is there's a video station set up out in the lobby. Melissa Martin is taking care of that. We really encourage you to record a short 1 or 2 minute video. Okay? Tell us why you support Convention of States. If you're a constituent of Senator Eddie Settle, then address your comments to him. Ask him to support HJR 235. Or if you're not, just address it to your senator or the Senate in general to support that. So we're going to put all those together into a compilation video and use that with the Senate. Which one was that? Who's the problem child? Dennis? These legislators are always problems.
Always make noise, that's what we do.
Always a few, if this is the least technical problem we have tonight, I will be very, very thankful. So anyway, let's go ahead and start off with Senator Santorum.
Thank you. First, thank you all for coming out here tonight. And I see some COS supporters. You got your swag on. I appreciate that. And I'm sure there's people here who are here to learn, and there might be people here who actually don't support COS. All are welcome. We look forward to this kind of engagement. I'm traveling from, I live in Northern Virginia right now, so I traveled down here, and I just wanted to start this conversation on 2 concepts that I think we can all agree on. Correct me if I'm wrong, but does anybody in this room think that the federal government is out of control in both its spending and its increasing concentration of power and leading to what would be a tyranny that can destroy the very fabric of our country? Does anyone not believe that? Raise your hand if you don't believe that. Okay, so we're all that. What would you say is the likelihood that happens? If we do nothing, we sort of continue on this path. Does anybody believe the likelihood is less than 90%? Anybody believe that it's less than 90% that we're going to reach a calamitous state, whether it's a revolution or whether it's a collapse, or whether, does anybody think that the risk is less than 90%? Does anybody actually believe that you think it's less than 90%? Okay, there's one person. Does anybody, how about 95%? Let's go there, 99%. So, in other words, you're fairly certain, the vast majority of us, are fairly certain that if we don't do anything, things aren't going to be good. Okay? So if we start there, everything has risk associated with it. I flew from Washington to Dulles. There's risk, and that plane might not have landed safely. But I took that risk to come here because this was important enough for me to do. You say, well, that's sort of a small risk. Well, it is, but it's not no risk, right? And you got in your car, and you drove here. There's risk associated with that. I can go on through everything in life that we do has some element of risk, but because we do it as a habit, we tend to minimize the risk because we sort of factor that all in. Here we're in a situation where we're talking about something that we're not used to doing. And therefore, we tend to, like almost anything you do for the first time. I mean, for the first time that you drove a car, you were probably a little afraid something bad was going to happen. You're going to get in a wreck. Or first time you flew an airplane, you were probably really nervous, right? First time you do anything, you exaggerate the risk because of uncertainty, and you just are new to it. And that's the situation we're dealing with Convention of States. The risk is exaggerated because people are unfamiliar with it. And it's like everything in life, it is natural. And so when I talk to people who are saying, I'm really concerned about, and they list several things, don't be critical of them. It's a natural thing for human beings to be nervous about things they don't understand or that they don't have experience with, right? I mean, I remember when I was in college, I rode a bus on the Amalfi Coast, and this bus is like a narrow 2-lane highway. I mean, it's almost like one bus. One car could get through. I'm on a bus. And this guy's ripping around, and he's honking his horn as he approaches the corner because he's honking to let the person know that he's coming around. Otherwise, we're going to crash. And I'm looking down, and there's no guardrail, and I'm looking straight. But this guy's flying around here like it's no big deal, right? He was comfortable with the risk because he's done it so many times. I was not comfortable with the risk. All right? So I share that with you because when we discuss this matter, the biggest thing you're going to hear is a concern that there is risk associated with this that's just an unreasonable risk. Here's the point. It's like whether you're going to vote for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. You have two options. There aren't 10 options. You got two options. It's a binary choice. And from what we discussed and we all agree on, say one, that it's almost certain, there's almost no risk in the thinking that our country is going to collapse, then given that, what should be our risk tolerance to try to do something that our founders gave us to do in case this happened? What should be our risk tolerance to do this other thing? And I would argue it should be pretty high, because the risk here is certain. And so if the risk is certain, or close to it, then why wouldn't you try something designed by our founders to try to deal with this risk? So we get into all the details, and I hope to, but I think it's really important. As someone, I can tell you, your risk assessment, no offense, sir, but your risk assessment of what's going to happen in our country if we do nothing is spot on. I am someone who can tell you, having served 16 years in Washington, run for president twice, this country and Congress and the president are not going to fix themselves. There is no mechanism in our country right now to put things in the order in which our country can remain free and safe and prosperous for the long term, but for an intervention. And the reason I say that is because people will pull out their Constitution. There's nothing wrong with this Constitution. Oh, but if it were that Constitution we were talking about. It is not that Constitution. That Constitution doesn't exist anymore. The Founders' Constitution is not the Constitution we live under right now. Obviously, there have been 27 amendments. But let's throw out the first 10. You can say, well, it's in the original Constitution. It was. It was amended shortly thereafter. But the reality is, it's not even the Constitution and the amendments. It is the court decisions that interpret the Constitution. If you ask for a copy of the Constitution from the General Printing Office, they will send you a 2,600-page document. That is the Constitution we live under. And so when people say, don't touch my Constitution, 2,600 pages is a heck of a lot of touching. You'd be in jail if that was a girl you were touching, okay? This is a dangerous thing to say, that, oh, we can't touch the Constitution. The left has been touching the Constitution, using the court to twist the Constitution beyond recognition. And we are living with the consequences of that. There is a copy of the Constitution annotated by the Supreme Court. This is an actual document printed by the federal government, right here. And I don't hear anybody getting up at a town hall meeting and waving this in the air saying, if they can lift it, saying, don't touch my Constitution. This is the Constitution we live with. This is the certainty that is going to destroy the country unless we stand up. And I'm going to tell you two things that are important to understand what I mean stand up. Do I believe this is necessary to propose amendments that can help us fix this problem? Yes, I do. That's why I'm here. But I'm here for actually a more fundamental reason. And that is to hold the convention, period. This will be a success if we simply hold the convention. And after that convention, the American public has a thorough discussion about federalism, the meaning of the state power and federal power, has a good debate about several amendments, and whether they pass something or not, to me, it would be great, but it really doesn't matter. What matters is that the states have asserted their authority to check the federal government. Once any employee, any business person knows that there's someone who can check their power, you change your behavior. Right now, Washington has no boss, except trying to please as many people as they can to get the votes they want. And that means to give as much away of somebody else's money to give to people who will vote for them. That's what it is. The only way to change that is to put a check. This little document, and even this document, was designed for checks and balances. There is no check on the federal power, and until we get one with a convention of states, until the states resume their rightful place in the order of our country of power, which is at the top of the food chain, not the bottom, our country will not be free and safe and prosperous going forward for your children and grandchildren. Thank you.
All right, so next up is Dennis. So Dennis, we'll see if you can do this without running.
I'm going to step down if that's all right.
That's fine with me.
Feel better, doesn't it? I've got to recognize my Alamance County brothers and sisters that are there.
That's his groupies.
I'm actually their groupie. I want to tell you how, what good care COS and the people and volunteers of it have taken care of me in my role as a legislator. You guys are fantastic. Not just the folks in Alamance, just the people that come on Wednesdays. I see a lot of familiar faces here. Saw Liberty the Llama out there, regular celebrity in Raleigh now is the Llama. I just appreciate the effort you make to be there, to show up. Senator Santorum did a great job. I appreciate that. Can't wait to hear what Vanessa has to say as well. I'm going to give you a little lower view from the state level. House Joint Resolution 235 is still active. It has passed the House. It will be active until midnight, December 31 of 2024. I can guarantee after the elections, the House and the Senate will be reconvening because we're going to have some business based upon election results that might need taken care of. That would be a great time for the Senate to step up and say, let's get this done, get it passed and off the table, and be number 2.
Amen.
We don't need a supermajority, right? We just need 26 out of 50, that's all. And we have 30 out of 50 are Republicans. So we need you to contact Senator Settle and others who might seem hesitant to support and talk to them in your most winsome, in your most friendly, respectful voice. You know, like you parents used to say, you know, you got an inside voice and an outside voice. Don't use the outside voice when you go to talk to senators or House members. Most of you already know that. You're very well behaved about that. Look at them and consider how you would like to be persuaded by someone. Has anybody ever yelled you to their position? Besides your dad. No one has ever yelled me to their point of view. And you never will. You have to do it by patience, by being probably the best informed person in that room, in that conversation. You have to do it respectfully. You don't want to lose your audience. And if you come in with an attitude, even to the legislative assistant, that gets remembered. You don't want to do that. Treat people the way you would like to be treated. Nobody knows all about Convention of States in Raleigh, myself included. There's a lot still to learn about it, but we know it's the right thing to do. Our founders did 2 things to us, I think, among others, but 2 that stand out of my mind. They gave us a system without compare in human history. They gave us a system where you can exercise your freedoms to the greatest potential that you have. And that government is not to be in your way. Government's not supposed to even be your partner to help you. Government's simply supposed to be the umpire. To say, these are the rules, foul, not foul, whatever. To make sure we all play by the rules. So they gave us a system unparalleled for freedom. And what happened in America? We exploded into the most powerful, respected nation in the world. Secondly, in that system is a requirement of you and I. We have to step up and be responsible for these freedoms. We can't sit this out. This is not something that we can say, well, I've voted today, I've done my duty. No, that's just the beginning. You have to be knowledgeable. You have to be able to defend this system of government that is so unique and that has given us so many opportunities around our nation's history. So they gave us a great system, but it requires more from every American, not just you in this room. It requires more from everyone. We've got to be informed. We've got to know what the Constitution says. We've got to know what the limits of the federal government are. That annotated Constitution is embarrassing. That's like Webster's dictionary times on steroids. And that's supposed to be the law of the land. Who's going to know that? That's not how it should be here in America. But I want to thank you for your past support. You're the reason we got it through the House. We also had strong support from Speaker Moore, Majority Leader Bell, Rules Chairman Destin Hall, who is slated probably to become the new Speaker of the House. So we've got some real strong support in the House. There is strong support in the Senate. We just need to get more. So that's what I would encourage you to do. Speak to people on COS the way you would like them to speak to you. Politicians, we're really no different than you. You know, I have a title. That's about the only difference. There's nothing special about me. 8 years ago, I was out there learning about COS for the first time at a legislators conference in Washington, D.C. About to meet Tom Colbert, a great patriot. Reminds me of something. This is our hour. We have never been this close in North Carolina to getting the Convention of States passed. The first time it passed, the Senate approved it, and the House defeated it by 3 votes out of about 118. The next 2 sessions where it was introduced, the House passed it, and it sat like an unboiled egg just sitting there. And I know you're frustrated. Do you think I'm frustrated? Yeah, a little bit. But I'm not going to show that, because it does no good. What I want to do is be the best conduit for getting COS passed as I possibly can. That means I know, I learn, I study what COS is all about. And it means I give to other people the same grace I would love to receive from them when having conversations about COS. And don't forget to pray. You want to get that Senate changed? Let's pray more. Let's pray more. And I think we might see something happen. So I'm looking forward to the questions. That's actually the best part of something like this for me. And I don't have to run back home to Alamance County right away, so I will be happy to stick around and just engage you in conversation to tell you thank you personally, because you are the reason that COS has had such a great success on the State House level. So that's all I have to say. My wife Holly sends her regards, especially to our Alamance County friends. When you come in my office, the smartest thing I ever did was marry my legislative assistant. But I married him because he was my legislative assistant. We get one staff person generally as a House member. So I enjoy telling people when she's with me that I brought my entire staff. If you have any questions, you come to our office ever. If you come on a Wednesday or a Thursday and we're in session, please come by the office. You come say hello. We would love to meet you, because you are the heartbeat of this movement, not me. You are the ones that are going to make it happen. And thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. I thank you for all the work and effort you have put into getting COS to this point where we are right on the precipice. It just needs a little. Let's get it done. All right. Thank you.
Before Vanessa makes a few comments about, we've talked a little bit about legislatively where we are. Vanessa will talk a little bit more about that and a little bit more about the COS organization and what we're all about and so forth. But before she does that, so if you have questions, if you've written down on those cards, raise your hand and we'll come around and collect those. And then while Vanessa is talking to you for a few minutes, we'll try to consolidate those and incorporate those into the Q&A. So no question off limits. And and as we go through here, if you have additional questions, just raise your hand, we'll pick those up. Okay, Vanessa, you want to go ahead and say a few words?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm always blown away by the opportunity to listen to these gentlemen. They're amazing learners, right? They've been students, and they're great examples. So take advantage of what you heard tonight and follow their example. Be a student, and then stand up and speak up, right? Thank you, gentlemen, for what you do. We appreciate it. I love what Dennis said, and when he mentioned treat others how you would be treated. I was raised with that as the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have done to you. But sometimes we get really frustrated. But he said, don't show it, right? That was very good. That was good advice. So I do, speaking of getting frustrated, I will keep a smile on my face, and I'll talk to you about where we're at in North Carolina legislatively. So as Representative Riddell just mentioned, that we passed a resolution in the House, and it has been languishing in the Senate. And honestly, right now, all of our legislators are in campaign mode. Convention of States, probably along with a lot of other bills and resolutions, is not really on their mind. And so that's what we're here to learn about and figure out how to do. We want this to be on their mind, right? And so we're here in Wilkesboro specifically because we have a senator here who's wonderful. Senator Eddie Settle is a good man. He loves the Lord, yes. Yes, you can give him a hand. He loves the Lord, and he wants to honor him and do right. He wants to do right by his constituents. And his constituents aren't telling him about COS. So if you're a constituent of Eddie Settle here in this area, he needs to hear from you. If you didn't get a video out there when you came in, I think, hopefully, we could probably do it afterwards. Get a little video snippet and send it to him and let him know that you support COS and you want him to do the same. He needs to hear from you because he's looking out for his constituents. So we also have several other, you guys got lots of handouts, right? On your way in. On one of them, on the back, let's see which one it is. Exercising our political muscle in North Carolina. On the back, legislative positions. It's the different folks that are either on the fence or no's. And so what I'd like you to do is reach out to them and let them know, maybe help answer any questions they have, maybe give them resources they might need, but we need their support in the Senate. They need to speak up to their leadership, actually bring it to the floor and vote yes for it. Now real quick, our goal right now with Convention of States is to get the resolution passed. And like Representative Riddell mentioned, we have until midnight on December 31st. And so that's not a lot of time. But we do have a chance in November specifically. And so we need to be engaged, and I would encourage you even to reach out on a weekly basis and just let them know who you are and check in, see how they're doing, and encourage them to bring up Convention of States. So our mission is that, or our goal is to get that resolution passed. Our mission, though, with Convention of States is to grow the largest self-governing group of activists in the nation. I think we're doing that. What do you think? And that means engagement and involvement. And so thank you, team. For those of you who did travel for Alamance or from Raleigh, for those of you that came out locally, thank you for doing that, because that's absolutely what's necessary. All right, so if, do we have all our questions gathered up?
Yes, I think you can start feeding those to me, guys, whenever you're ready. But I've got plenty of questions I can start off with if you're ready to go. So,
I think so.
okay. All right. Well, while some of our volunteers out there are collecting those and consolidating them, I'll go ahead and start off. Probably, and maybe I'll throw this to Rick. The most common argument that we hear across North Carolina from legislators, from people that are new to COS, and really true across the country as well, is this concept that Rick was speaking about in terms of the fear of not having done this before, but the runaway convention argument. It takes different types of forms, but in essence, we can't trust this process, that somehow the convention's gonna go off the rails, whether we're gonna get amendments that are crazy, or whether the convention's gonna come together and throw out the US Constitution and implement something different. It takes all kinds of forms. But Rick, why don't you talk a little bit about that whole argument and your perspective on it?
Yeah, it is, again, what I talked about before, the uncertainty, the fear of the unknown, the fear of a risk, you're taking a risk. And I think I addressed that with the whole concept of risk, but it's actually, it's a frustrating question in this regard, because there's so many checks in the process to make sure that things don't go off the rails. I mean, I can't think of anything else that I am involved with, was involved with politically, where there were so many hurdles to actually get this done. It's much harder than passing a bill. It's much harder than anything you would have ever done in the political sphere. This is legions harder. And no one seems to be that concerned that Congress is going to go and pass a bill that's going to destroy the country tomorrow. If they do, then they would be much more in favor of doing something like this. They don't sit up at night and they don't run around trying to stop that. But it's so much easier for the president to do something or the Congress to do something than it is to do this. And particularly as a conservative, there's no better forum for conservative ideas than at a convention of states. Why do I say that? Because it's one state, one vote. And of course, we all know Donald Trump may lose the election, but he will win far more states than Kamala Harris, whether he loses this election. But if he loses this election by 70 electoral votes, he'll still win more states than Kamala Harris. Why? Because all the small states, with the exception of Delaware, Rhode Island, a couple of the ones in New England, all the small states, small population states, are Republican. And so there's no better forum for our ideas to get a majority than in needing 26 individual states to vote with us. So think about that. So the Democrats, the left, would never want a convention of states because they know they don't have a majority for any of their ideas. In our case, we solidify that because we have a proposal that is limited to 3 things that you're allowed to discuss at this convention and propose amendments. Limiting terms, limiting fiscal issues, taxes and spending, and limiting jurisdiction. None of those things the Democrats want to do, right? So all 3 of those things, and you say, well, people can go beyond that. Well, think about that. We've had hundreds of petitions. You may not know this, but it's true. We have had hundreds of petitions that have been filed over the years to call for a convention. We've never had one. Right now, there are, some would argue, over 34 petitions for a balanced budget amendment convention, but one's not been called. You know why? Because the language of the 34 states that have passed it aren't the same. Mississippi has language that calls for a specific constitutional amendment, a specific, actually worded how they want the Constitution amended. Other states have more general. Well, we're for a convention that discusses it. Can you merge a specific one with the general one? No, you can't. And the Congress doesn't. And the courts won't make it. Why? Because whatever passes, and this has been held by the courts, whatever passes is the ground rules by which the law of the convention is governed. It's like when Dennis and the House passed a bill in North Carolina, and it goes over to Senator Settle's side and the Senate side, and they pass a similar bill, but some of the language is different. Does the governor then sign both bills and they figure it out? No. They have to get back together, and they have to have the exact language. Why? Because it's the governing law. Well, the resolution we're passing here is the governing law of the convention. If it's not identical, it doesn't aggregate in order to call the convention. Well, if that's the case, then how can you say, well, they'll go wild and they'll go off topic? The whole point of having 34 agree to the same language is so that they can't go off topic, that they are governed by these rules. It's just common sense. So on top of that, 34 states have to approve this language. No Democratic state has ever even brought it up in committee. No Democratic-controlled legislature has ever brought it up. No Democratic-controlled legislature will ever pass it. So what does that mean? That means to get to 34, you'll need 34 states controlled by Republicans. And once we get to the 34th state, all the other 33 will still have to be in Republican control, because if they're not, the Democrats will repeal it and you're back down. So at the time the convention is called, 34 of the 50 delegations will be controlled by Republicans. What possibly can go wrong? You say, well, we don't trust the people who will be sent, because some of these folks, you know, some of these leaders are not conservative. Ladies and gentlemen, the ideological spectrum is like this, right? Left, right. What we as Republicans talk about, and North Carolina isn't alone, it's probably not as bad as most states from what I can see. Some states, now over here on the right, where Republicans live, moderate Republicans, conservative Republicans. I'll move so it doesn't put it in front of you. But we're still on the right. I'll just move the spectrum so I'm not giving Dennis a headache. Our argument is here. And some of us would like to be over here. Some of us would like to be over here. And particularly those of us over here get really frustrated with the leadership that's over here. That's what we're fighting about, right? Everybody agree with that? Okay. Let me go back out here again. When we're at the convention, we're talking about here. We're nowhere near anywhere Republicans are. We're talking about the middle. Remember, everything that's proposed has to get 38 states to ratify. Anybody have a map of the states that have passed the Article 5 convention? Do we have that map somewhere? If you can bring it up to me, that'd be helpful. We need to get 38 states. People who are going to come to this convention, now there's another point. People who come to this convention, let's assume all of you from all different states, you're from all different states, and you're the delegation. You three are from North Carolina, and you've been appointed by your Senate and House to represent North Carolina, who voted for this resolution, to represent them at a national convention, televised, has the attention of the American public, probably the world. There'll be a huge debate about federalism, the role of the states, the role of the federal government, and you three will be known to everybody in your state who will be holding the votes for the state of North Carolina. You three will represent the will of the Republicans at the convention. You'll have a majority, so you three will make that decision. Will that be the most important thing you've probably ever done in your public life? For anybody, any legislator, right? Be the biggest deal. You've never done it. Be the biggest thing I've ever done in my public life. I ran for president. I lost, so if I won, it wouldn't have been the biggest deal, but I didn't win, so it wouldn't be the biggest deal. Okay? Okay. Imagine going there in front of God and country, representing your state, entrusted with you to do the right thing at this convention to try to bring this country together, and you're going to go rogue. You're going to go rogue, and you're going to try to eliminate the Second Amendment. That's what I hear. That's insane. That's insane. No one would do that. No one would do that. You're here at a time, a solemn time, to try to bring this country together under the watchful eye of all of your constituents. Remember, most of you are going to be elected officials. That's who's going to be coming there. You're going to commit political suicide at a national convention where, by the way, your one vote doesn't mean anything? Let me throw on top of that, most of the states, and I suspect North Carolina will be one of them, was said, Jeff, will have to take an oath to live by the limitations on that resolution. You will take an oath. In 10 states already, that oath comes with criminal penalties if you violate it. So not only are you going to embarrass yourself, be a scourge among your constituents and your own colleagues by violating your oath of office, but you're also going to go to jail. Now, how many people are going to do that? Are you worried that people are? This is not a rational concern. Remember, I'm talking about certainty over here. All you have here is, frankly, irrational concerns. 34 states. The things that are going to be argued are not between what two conservatives would fight about, but something that 38 states are going to have to pass. I was involved in 1994 with the Contract with America. Everybody remember that?
Yeah.
Contract with America? Do you know what you had to do to get a bill on the Contract with America? You had to have a poll that said that 80% of the public was for it. That's the Contract with America is made up of 80% issues. Those are the things that pass. Ideas, oh, we're going to stop the federal government from doing X, Y, and Z. Well, good luck. You'll never get it passed. Well, so why are we doing this? I come back to the point before. Number one, to do it. Number two, there are things we can do that would be meaningful as a first step to reasserting the state's authority. Number one, I mention this all the time, limiting the Supreme Court to 9 justices. 38 states will vote for that. That's something that will pass. Does anybody think that's something we shouldn't do? Anybody think that wouldn't be a threat that the Democrats, if they ever got in power, would do that? Of course they would. It would be the one go for broke proposal. We can stop that. That's worth doing. Those are the kinds of things, maybe one bill, one subject. Again, you can't poke the bear and expect, when I say poke the bear, poke the left, and expect Massachusetts to ratify it. So, oops, I lost the thing. Sorry about that. I talked too long. But if you look at, I can list you 13 states that are left, just give me a map of the country, 13 states that I guarantee you would never pass anything that isn't a broad consensus of the country. What are you worried about that some left-wing idea would come out of a convention where 34 of the delegations are Republican in the first place, plus you got 34 houses of the legislature controlled by Republicans. You got to get 38 to pass a crazy idea that would be against the law of the convention anyway. I can keep going on and on. There's so many. Okay, here who has to pass a crazy idea? Sorry. Vermont, New York, I'll list them. Vermont, New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, Colorado, New Mexico, Virginia, DC, DC doesn't count, Maryland. Folks, and that's not even counting Minnesota. Michigan, all these other states, Maine. It is hard to pass anything that is a good idea, much less try to pass something that's a bad idea. So when I get down to this runaway convention, it is a complete red herring. It is, nothing's impossible, but this is as close to impossible in a political arena as I can fathom. Why? Because the founders are pretty freaking smart. They knew that the public wouldn't want us monkeying around with the Constitution, so they made it really hard. This is really hard. And that's why we should feel comfortable to do it. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Rick. So I want to kind of build on that a little bit and throw a question to Dennis. It's actually a couple of questions that are kind of related, and you can talk a little bit about this in relationship to how we would do it here in North Carolina. But the question is, where in Article 5 in the Constitution does it say how the delegates are chosen? of course, this is implied in that, is that the Constitution does not really say how the delegates are chosen to the convention, and who chooses them, the states or the federal Congress. And kind of related to that, how many delegates, where in the Constitution, Article 5 does it say how many delegates each state gets? Will Maine and Texas have the same amount as delegates? So the question about the one state, one vote, and the number of delegates, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that in general, and then this concept of some of the legislation that you're thinking about after we pass the resolution.
Okay, thank you. Yes, yes, no, and yes.
Very good.
What I have is a copy of the bill we passed also in the legislature this last session. It's called the Faithful Article 5 Commissioner Act. And this puts the teeth in the performance of anybody delegated as a commissioner from North Carolina. I worked with this, and some of the folks from COS, Robert Gableson has put together a form, something similar to this, pretty fantastic. And I whittled it down to North Carolina, so it's about 3 pages long. But in here, it delineates who picks. And the selections will be made by the state legislature. Only a certain amount can be legislators. It can't be all legislators. You have to have some people from private sector. The governor has 0 role in this at all. And that there is also a crime attached if you exceed your commissioner authority. You will take an oath before you would be seated in any kind of convention of states. And that oath says you will follow the call, the resolution in the 3 areas that Senator Santorum mentioned in there. So this passed the House like its cousin. It's sitting in the Senate. But there is this format that has already been put together. I think it's been successful in the House. And gosh, I think the Senate would pass this. And if I had to do it all over again, I would pass this first and then go for the Convention of States, because you have the safeguards in place about any kind of road commissioners. Senator Santorum, the presenter for it, is pretty obvious, isn't it? Nobody is going to do this. Maybe Joe Biden might do it in his presence. That's not a normal person. There are safeguards in place. And when you start reading about the convention, when you start reading about the intent of framers, when they put this together, remember, this was to give the states an end to run around the federal government. So why would we do things that would give the federal government the ability to stop you? You wouldn't have done that. That was not their intent at all. It was to give us, the states, the ability to bring back power and decision-making from Washington, D.C. that we have forfeited. And we, the states, we have been bribed with our own money. Think about that. How many times do you hear, I do in the legislature, I hear, I'm sure you do too, that, oh, well, if we did that, we changed that law, the federal government might cut off the funding. Where did the funding come from? It didn't come from the federal government. All their taxes comes from the states, generally. So this gives us the power that the founders intended that we have. I think it might have been Mark Levin who calls it an intervention. I forget where I heard that, but it's a great expression. That this is not so much a convention of the states as it is an intervention of the states. If you had a family member that was drug-addled or addicted to alcohol, had some problem like that, and you know they were beyond taking care of it themselves, they were way over their head, they needed some outside source. As a family member, you would be driven to corral that individual and impose upon them the treatments, the help, the assistance that they needed to break the addiction. The federal government is addicted to our money. It's addicted to deficit spending in a big way. I just read probably this week that we're getting close to $1 trillion in interest only on the national debt per year. I can remember, I'm that old, I can remember when I had a bumper sticker on my car that said no $1 trillion debt. Do you? Yeah, okay. Now it's no $1 trillion debt to pay the interest every year. We cannot continue. So the states have a very aggressive role that we can play in this. And when I first heard about it, I mentioned like 8 years ago, I was in the back of the room at a presentation, and as this was explained by Tom Coburn, Mike Ferris, and Mark Meckler, the light just went off. I thought, that's it.
Sorry. Just let me know when you need it.
But as a legislator, I thought, this is it. Really, there is nothing else but this in the stage we have gone to. So if this does not work, we're all in for that time. Remember what I said earlier? Founders gave us a form of government unlike any the world had ever seen. And we've enjoyed the manifold blessings of it. But they also gave us responsibilities with that. And we're at a point now where we have been shirking our responsibilities for so long. Freedom is in the balance in this election, like never before. I've never seen this. I mean, you hear every year, well, it's the biggest election of my lifetime. This is it. I will tell you from the state perspective, if we get 4 more years of what we've had, there will be no relationship between this federal government and the states. We will be minions. And your rights will evaporate. What else was in that?
Addressing one state, one vote. That comes from the reality that every convention that has been held among the states, there were 20 or 30 prior to the Constitutional Convention, the Constitutional Convention itself, and there have been subsequent conventions, not Article 5 conventions of the states, but other state, interstate conventions. For example, I always use the example of the Colorado River Compact. It was an interstate convention. Every state, California, Utah, Arizona, all have the same number of votes. One state, one vote. Why? Because every state is a sovereign entity, and every state is as a result, is a vote. The Constitutional Convention, the big states had as many votes as the small states, 1. Every convention of states, it's not a convention of delegates, it's a convention of states. It says it in the Constitution. You say, well, how do we know? Well, you use the example, it says trial by jury. Well, how do we know? It doesn't say, it says in the Constitution you have trial by jury. Well, how do we know how that works? Well, because in England and in the United States there have been trial by juries for hundreds of years, and everybody knew what trial by jury was. Well, there have been convention of states for over 100 years. Everybody knew what a convention of states was. And so you don't define something that's in a popular vernacular, because particularly something as basic as one state, one vote is a convention of states. Pretty obvious what they're talking about, which is each sovereign entity is appointed. And so at a convention where every state got one vote, and they now call for a convention of states, pretty obvious that it's one state, one vote. And if someone like California came and said, we want to change it, go ahead, they can propose a change. Well, there are a lot more states who are small states who are not going to give their power to California. So there could be an amendment. You can amend the rules, but that will fail because the small states will outnumber the big states, and they'll be voting one state, one vote on that vote.
Okay, thank you. I was talking.
One other thing, as a legislator, everything is run. You pass a set of rules at the beginning of your session to run the legislature. Same thing will happen at this convention. They'll pass a set of rules. So everything is run by rule, but not everything. In the United States Senate, you have rules, but you also have, you may know what else it's operated by? Precedent. Yeah. Same thing in the courts, same thing in the legislature, precedents. And precedents matter, unless the precedents are overruled by a vote. That's the case here. The precedent, every single convention of states in the history of our country has been one state, one vote. Therefore, to overrule that precedent, there must be a vote based upon the old precedent, which is every state will have a vote as to whether to overturn it, and they won't.
Okay, and so I was talking to Grant with some of the questions. I don't know if it was answered, but in terms of the number of delegates from each state, it's up to the states to choose how many delegates. I think in your bill it was 7?
7 delegates.
7 delegates. But it doesn't matter. I mean, California.
Some have 5. Some. I mean, It's usually 5 to 7 is usually the number.
Right, but the states can choose the number of delegates, but as Brick was saying, it's one state, one vote presidents. Great questions, folks. So there's no way I'm going to get to all of these, but we'll do our best here. I'm going to throw a couple to Vanessa that are kind of related, but so for the various state legislators that are hesitant on COS, what are their typical reasons? Number one. Number two, now I'm throwing you two questions. Now Biden wouldn't be able to handle this. But I know you can. The other question kind of related is how do we educate the young people about the Constitution and the Convention of States? This is a major problem. So kind of those two questions, kind of a grassroots type of thing, and plus where we see the opposition coming from the legislators.
Absolutely. So they've already addressed, I think, some of the opposition, and probably the most common that we hear is, well, whenever a convention happens, we don't know who's going to be attending that, who's going to be the delegates or commissioners. So I don't know I think it was Senator Santorum that may have mentioned that. I've heard them talk both about it, but and so that's one of the fears that they have, and to me, that's a little arrogant, because if it weren't for the grassroots, for you guys, they wouldn't even know about it, right? You're the ones who had let them know that you want an Article 5 amending Convention of States, correct? How many of you have reached out to your legislators? Yeah, and you let them know that this is something that you want to see done. So their big concern is, well, we don't know who's going to be in charge, and so I think Senator Santorum had already address that issue. That's probably the one we hear the most. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's another one in particular that, Jeff, that you're thinking of besides.
I mean, we've had all kinds of them. I mean,
Yeah.
There's one legislator, one senator that told us, well, if we were the 34th state to pass the resolution, I would vote for it.
Okay, can I address that issue?
Sure.
Tell your legislator, you don't want to wait to be the 34th state. Because if you're the 34th state, every Senate and House race in North Carolina will be a multi-million-dollar race. Because the left is going to go crazy. Every big dollar organization, the left outspends the right in every election, usually 2 or 3 to 1 these days. Harris is going to outspend Trump probably 2 to 1. Okay? Imagine you're the 34th state. My hope is we'll have a wave election and the left won't see it coming, and we'll get to 34 before they know it. But if we're at 33 and we happen to get 33 states passing it, and you're that one state hanging out there that hasn't passed it, let me assure you, there's going to be more money in your race than you know what to do. They will do, and if you're in a swing state, like North Carolina is not as much of a swing state legislatively, but there are a bunch of others. The reality is the left is going to come in and try to take away the Republican majority and repeal it. It's going to get nasty. They do not want this. If you're a person on the right, for me, that's all you need to know. That they will move heaven and earth to stop this from happening. They are 100%, this is the greatest threat to them. This is a check on them. And they don't want checks. They want the Supreme Court to be able to change the Constitution as soon as they get five Democratic members on there. And that's what they'll do. And they don't want you sticking your nose in that. So I guarantee you, they will spend money that you have never seen in a legislative race. So I tell all these little states out in the mountains that haven't passed it, oh, well, wait, no. No, they'll buy and sell you for lunch. You guys who now have supermajorities in South Dakota, the Democrats will have supermajorities by the time they're done with you. Get this done, get it out of the way, let someone else have a problem with it. Let Pennsylvania worry about it. Then it'll cost a lot of money for them to win.
Okay, so we got lots of questions and very little time. I'm going to go a little further into the Q&A here. These guys are going to be around if we didn't get to your questions, which we didn't get to a lot of them, but there's a couple of these that are related. You talked a little bit about it, but I want to bring it back because they're specific questions. So, by design, the Constitution imposes fiscal restraints on the federal government and limits the power of the federal government. we don't follow the Constitution, how will COS help?
That's a great question, and it's I think, a very valid question. And all I can do is point to you that the reason they're not following the Constitution is the court changed the Constitution. So if you were to talk to a member of Congress and say, well, yeah, I can pass a law telling you how to run your education, your schools here in North Carolina, because the court says I can. And so if you pass an amendment, look at the 17 amendments that have passed since the founding. Two of them are no longer operational. That's the passage and repeal of prohibition. So there's 15 amendments. Read those 15 amendments and tell me which one isn't being adhered to. They all are, right? Some may have been tweaked a little bit by the courts, but not much. Usually, an amendment that passes, remember, it got 75% of the states to say yes to this, which means that probably 80+% of the country was for it. No one's going to say, oh no, we're not going to pay attention to that. They won't do that. These people are afraid, you know, politicians for all their courage are scared to death of you, right? And so if you stand up on your hind legs and say, no, this is what we're going to do, and 80% of you go along, guess what? They'll do it. They're not going to back away from it. They're going to follow the law. Now, 100 years from now, may they change their mind? Maybe, but you know, it gives us 100 years. That's a pretty good deal, right? And so again, remember, most of these things that are going to pass, all of these things that are going to pass and be ratified are going to be wildly popular. The public will have its say. What we have to do is be wise, and the delegates have to be wise to figure out what are popular things that we can pass that can get 38 states that will have some meaningful restraint on, probably not as much as where we are now, but where we could go that would be really dangerous. So a lot of these things, particularly I think at this convention, I would call fencing, right? You're fencing the other side from going places where they shouldn't go, like limiting the Supreme Court to 9 members. If I was a delegate going at this convention, that would be my mindset. What are things that are popular that are accepted here in America, but you know the left wants to go there? 50 years ago, I would have put a marriage amendment in the Constitution, and it would have passed overwhelmingly, right? But we don't think, look, we are stupid on the right. We're just dumb. We don't think about where the left is going and try to cut them off before they get there. That's what this can do. Why? Because we have a super majority. We have an opportunity with this convention to have the best minds together and thinking about where the left could go that today is incredibly unpopular. Like 15 years ago, Barack Obama said, oh, I'm not for gay marriage. He would never say, right? Because no one would say that. There are issues today where the Democrats say, oh, no, we'll never do that. And you know 20 years from now, it's exactly what they're going to do. Cut them off before they get there. Okay? That's what you can do here. You can assert your authority, number one. And number two, you can cut them off before they decide to go down a bad path. If that ain't good enough reason to do it, and again, none of your arguments about your Republican leadership and your rhino Republicans has anything to do with this. A rhino Republican speaker is not, or leader, is not going to disagree with you on limiting the court to 9 members. Right? They're not going to agree with you to cut off them from, allowing children to engage in consensual sexual activity. That's where they're going. Right? Your rhino leader isn't going to say, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. Of course he's going to do that. That's the point. If you get bogged down in your internal politics in the state, you're missing the forest for the trees. That's not where the argument's going to be here. It's going to be on common sense things of where the crazy left is going. And all of us can agree not to do that.
Okay, I'm gonna throw this question out now. Maybe Dennis and Rick can both kind of weigh in on this. So Article 6 of the Constitution targets unconstitutional federal edicts so that the states can pass nullification bills to prevent government overreach. Why do we need a COS when we already have this safeguard in the Constitution? It is dangerous in our current political climate to tamper with the Constitution.
Well, I don't think it's tough at all. I think I've laid out what the purpose of this, the idea of nullification. We sort of had a war on the issue of nullification. Didn't go particularly well for the folks who wanted to nullify. The reality is we deal with nullification, though, in little forms all the time. You have states that pass laws on marijuana that are counter to federal law. You have states that don't enforce laws on immigration. I mean, there's a lot of things that the states do that would fall under that rubric of Article 6 that could and would be contested at a federal court. So there's sort of, I would call them microaggressions, if you will. But the idea that the states are going to be successful in simply not enforcing or nullifying federal edicts, again, we got this thing. And Article 6 has been interpreted. You can read it. Article 6 has been interpreted. States don't have the authority to do that. And you can say, well, but the Constitution, yeah, I know. Constitution says that the states have that the federal government has no power to, doesn't say it. It doesn't give the power to the federal government to legislate on education. Do they do it? Yes. Okay, how do they get around it? Well, they got around it through what? Yeah, the General Welfare Clause. And as a result of that, they said, well, we're not going to tell the states how to run their schools, but we will tell states how to run their schools. They don't have to listen. You have every right not to listen, but if you don't listen, we're not going to give you money. Okay? So my point is, all of these things, you can say, well, the Constitution says this. Yes, it did, 240 years ago, and it's been amended. Let me just repeat this for the 100th time. Quit quoting me the Constitution, quote this. This is the Constitution. I mean, don't be so naive to believe that the actual language in that original Constitution is word for word what it means then. Because the courts have interpreted those words. They interpreted the words to say that you have a constitutional right to abortion. Where is that in the Constitution? It's not there. So don't say, oh, well, they don't live by the... They don't. I agree. The court has changed it. What do we have to do through this constitutional amendment process? Overrule the court and establish a new precedent, a new constitutional limitation, and then hold to it. Why? Because it's the broad consensus for the American public and the court won't touch it. Maybe for 100 years. And again, I'll take 100 years.
Can you talk, Rick, a little bit about what you think, maybe your top 3 or 4 amendments that you think might come out of the convention that would have this broad popular support? Number one, that can make it out of the convention with 26 votes and be popular enough that 38 states would do it. And you kind of touched on it, but how long amendments, an argument that I hear sometimes is, well, they don't, of course they don't follow the Constitution, they don't follow the amendments are being, chipped away.
Are presidents limited to 2 terms? Yes, presidents are still limited to 2 terms. When I go through all the 15 amendments that are, do we have an income tax today? Yes, we have an income tax today. Do we popularly elect senators? Yes, we popularly elect. I mean, these are the amendments that have passed. And we live by them all. We accept them as just, that's what we live and breathe. Women have the right to vote? Yes, women have the right to vote. I mean, all of these things were passed by a constitutional amendment. And guess what? They're very broadly supported ideas, right? And so what we're talking about here are very broadly supported ideas whose time have come. And so there are amendments that I mentioned a couple of them. There may be others. I don't know. I mean, I don't think a lot about it. I try not to give too many examples because I don't want people then pointing and say, oh, this is what they want to do. I don't want to do anything. I want to have a convention. That's what I want to have. And then you get to participate. You get to decide what those popular things are, not me. I just give you an example of one that I think could be one that would be important. But maybe that isn't it. Maybe it couldn't get 38 votes. I think it could, but maybe it's couldn't. But the public is going to be deeply engaged in this. There'll be lots of ideas floating out there. Just so you understand, this convention will be held. It'll probably be held, I pray and hope, and I'm sure it will not be. It won't be held in Washington or New York. It'll be held someplace out in the middle of America, right? And it'll be several months. They'll convene it. They'll take testimony. There'll be three areas. There'll be 3 committees set up, each to explore, maybe even more. There may be some committees that take different parts. For example, there may be a committee on fiscal restraints that takes taxation. There maybe takes spending. Want to take something that's compliant, who knows? But there'll be lots of people who have ideas who will come and testify. And they'll have legal scholars who will come and critique those testimonies. There'll be people who will look at, there'll be proposed amendments that will be maybe accepted in committee, and then there'll be there'll be debates about each word in that amendment and how it could be potentially twisted to do something you don't want by a court in the future. There'll be so much attention paid to every single word and phrase in every single amendment. This is the kind of intense scrutiny and debate that will go on that you will have an opportunity to participate in and that you don't now. And public opinion will matter because you've got to go to the 38 state legislators and get it passed. So I think people think this is something that can be done in the middle of the night by people that you don't trust. No, that's not how this works. This is a convention that is going to be public, published, and out there for everyone to see and participate in. The only way this is successful is if you build consensus through this process. Because if you don't build consensus, then nothing gets passed. And the way you build consensus is to have a credible process that people felt like they had participation in. And therefore, when you go out to the states, there is lift behind the ideas. If you have ideas, and look, I'm not saying that you don't put forward an amendment like a balanced budget amendment. I think it would be a great thing to do. I don't think you're going to get 38 votes, but is it worth having a balanced budget amendment sent to the states for ratification? Might be. You might have some amendments that are proposed that you know are probably not going to pass, but that there is broad popular support for, and there might, and just having the debate and having it out there is worth that discussion as a shot over the bow of Congress and the president. So there may be call them message amendments, but I think they'll be few and far between, because if you have too many messages, then your message gets all garbled. You might have 1, maybe 2 message amendments. That'd be my recommendation. But again, I think that the folks who oppose this think, oh, this is just going to be chaos and all these horrible things and people are going to control things. It's just not possible under this forum, because our founders understood how this would work. And it's amazing to me that the very people who say they love our founders and for everything in the Constitution except this, okay? And you say, well, we're for this, but this is the wrong time. Do you think our founders figured that the states would have to act in this fashion in a good time? Do you think everything that they thought things would be going great when the states did this? Of course not. They knew the states would use this as a break glass in case of emergency provision, which means things are going to hell in a handbasket. They knew that. That's why they designed it. They said at the convention, are we so arrogant to believe that if Congress would become a tyranny, or Washington would become a tyranny, they didn't say Washington because it wasn't Washington at the time, but if the federal government would become a tyranny, that they would limit their own power? Of course not. The states have to have the ability. What's he talking about? A time of tyranny. And so you said, well, the founders could never imagine a time of tyranny. They imagined tyranny. They knew tyranny. They fought a war against tyranny. So this idea that, we have no idea, the founders had no idea. Now what they had no idea is that we'd have a bunch of people in the legislature and across the country who would be afraid to use the authority they give them to save the country. That's what they would be surprised about.
Okay, I'm gonna, two more questions. We're right at the end, but I'm gonna go a couple more questions if it's okay with you.
Yeah, Dennis, you have to quit talking so much.
We'll shorten up the flimsy a little bit. But Dennis, I want to kind of go to you, maybe briefly, just talk a little bit about your experience with the simulated convention, because I think that's instructive, kind of builds on what Rick was talking about. So maybe you can talk about that, but particularly the one last year in 2023.
Could you all hear him earlier? No?
There you go.
There we go. Okay.
That's it. I bet the meeting on. For some reason I'm getting the reverb. Williamsburg is a great place to go to just to go, right? And we got to go to Williamsburg for the simulation. It was fantastic experience, very well ordered, very well done. I think it's a template. It gives us something to build on. When we get to the point where we can do an Article 5 convention of states, we've been practicing, we've been rehearsing. We found some of the bugs, and the results were very, very good. One of the things I would like to say in response to a previous question is one of the attractions to me for a convention of states is the educational aspect of it. Not just the political, of getting something passed or done, but we are in a sad need of a national civics lesson to decide what kind of government do we want. Do we want a federalist style government where the federal government has responsibilities, the state governments have responsibilities, but the federal government is not to dominate the states? We have to get before our fellow citizens, I think, the challenge of what America was intended to be, that annotated obscenity up there. Started from a 7-article document, our Constitution. So what I like about Convention of States is when you start talking about these issues, think about all of the things we talked about tonight that deal with civics and your civic responsibility of citizenship, of being an active citizen, not being a passenger in the bus, but driving the bus. That's our call. You know, the founders, as I said earlier, gave to us a great form of government, but it requires a lot more of us than we're given. And that's why we're in the mess we are in. We'd rather go golfing than go study our Constitution. We'd rather go fishing than actually apply what we have learned in conversation with other people and becoming advocates for less government, more individual, free choice. That's what this is about. It's about trying to reclaim lost territory. And I think when we get to the point, we are going to have a convention of states eventually. Of that I'm convinced. When we get there, imagine the focus and the attention that will be drawn to that. Every news media is going to be there on the floor. On our simulation, people had access to the floor except when we were in the middle of some business or voting. And that's what it's going to be like. It's going to be a protracted event. Ours was 3 days, I think. Wonderful 3 days. I was very honored to be a part of that. But imagine doing a convention of states for the first time in American history and the kind of attention that will get worldwide. And then you've got this fantastic civics conversation that's going to sweep through the country as they meet and they deliberate. And there's nothing going to be done in secret. Everybody's going to have their cell phones out. It won't be done like the original Constitutional Convention was, where there was secrecy. This is going to have the attention of everybody, and we do need to engage our fellow citizens on what is intended by the original Constitution. And almost every problem you find today, whether it's status of spending or corruption of relationships within families, all of that goes back to forgetting what we were given. And if we can reclaim that understanding and that knowledge, I think that will help in this effort to try to get a convention done. The simulation, I think that's as close as you could ever get to actually having been in the original Constitutional Convention. There was a deliberation, a sobriety about everything that was done. It wasn't, yuck, pat slap on the back and what a great time we're having. Everybody got serious. I was amazed in the committee meeting I was in that how deadpan. These are people we've had deals with already, and you kind of get to know people and you're having a good exchange of ideas, but in committee, it was business. It wasn't a time for horseplay, it wasn't a time for making light, it was a time to be serious about what we're doing. The fate of our nation is relying upon us to bring forth something that people can grab a hold to and say, see, this happened in simulation. We can do this thing. I think it became another brick towards building that understanding. So,
Yeah, thank you. Just one thing to build on that. So there were 3 commissioners from North Carolina, Dennis, Tim Moffitt in the Senate, and John, I can't remember John's last name, from the Heritage Foundation. John Malcolm from the Heritage Foundation was the 3rd commissioner. And after that simulated convention, the Heritage Foundation came out and publicly endorsed. You can go on their website and find all the information on why they believe this is a good idea now, which was great. So the other thing too is if you go to our website, if you're interested, the whole thing is recorded. You can look at the proposed amendments that came out of that simulated convention. You can watch it. It's very interesting. And like Dennis said, I think what surprised me as a grassroots watching it is how serious people took it. I mean, they were dead serious in terms of what they were representing, and it was just a simulation. So if you can imagine what it would be in real life. So thanks, Dennis.
Quick word about John Malcolm. He was not a fully endorsing person at CON when he got there. And he was very thoughtful, reflective, bright, intelligent man. But by the time we got done, I could tell that his opinion had shifted. There's a place for this in our nation's history and in our future. That's what he did.
Thanks, Dennis. So I'm gonna wrap it up here, folks. I promise. I want to just throw one last question to Rick, because this is a great question, and something I talk to grassroots about a lot in a different form. But so the specific question: if Trump is not elected in November, will that change the CO's strategy, and how? And basically, will the election of Donald Trump reduce the risk of the things that you spoke about? So talk about this current election cycle and what it means to COS and really where we go down the road in terms of how important this election cycle is or isn't to the long-term solution that COS is.
Okay, we elected Donald Trump 8 years ago, and he served 4 years. Is the country better off now than it was when we elected Donald Trump? So, was it good during the 4 years of Donald Trump? It was much better, right? Did it last? No, it did not. It will not. The pendulum will swing, but as we all know, the pendulum is swinging, right? It just swings back and forth, but it keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse. If Trump wins, it'll swing back a little bit. Will it permanently change anything? No. I come back and talk about this, and this is really important to understand. It's all about the United States Senate. And the reality is that there's only, if you want to change something in Washington, you have to pass laws. And Donald Trump didn't pass very many laws. He passed a tax bill, but that expires next year. Right? Other than that, how many laws did he pass? Not very many. Not very many conservative ones, that's for darn sure. What he did was he did by executive order. On day one, Joe Biden fulfilled almost all of them. Unless you had, well, is that Trump's fault? No. Well, maybe in part some, but no, mostly 99% no. Why? Because in order to pass something, you need 60 votes in the United States Senate. You don't have 60 votes in the United States Senate, you can't pass anything. And that's what, well, let's get rid of the filibuster. Here's the problem. If we get rid of the filibuster, they can pass things with 51 votes. And remember, they want to do more with the federal government than we do. So it's easier to do it, to promise the public more and to pass more things than it is for Republicans to take away things. So you don't want to give them now that they've done all these bad things, make it easier for them to do more. So the filibuster remains vitally important. And so let's assume we can keep it. If we keep it, that means we got to get 60 votes. How many times since cloture was in effect, that's 1912, how many times since 1912 have the Republicans had enough seats in the Senate to override a cloture vote? In other words, just if all the Republicans stuck together, they could pass a bill that would, in other words, get the votes necessary for cloture so they can get to a vote and pass a bill. How many times since 1912? You're all right, none. Never. How many times the Democrats have had a supermajority to pass bills since 1912? Somebody in the back. Correct, 3 times. The New Deal, the Great Society, and Obamacare. You want to know what it means? It means big deals. You get supermajorities, you can do super things. But just understand, if you don't need supermajorities in the Senate, that's what's going to be up for us every year. More and more big government. And now, as was mentioned, the Republican Party isn't the party of small government anymore. They're not. In Washington, they're not. They're not for limited government. Donald Trump's not for limited government. I love Donald Trump. He's not for limited government. Okay? So let's just understand, Washington ain't fixing this. Can we all, I feel like I need to be in an AA meeting here. Can we all just stand up and say, I am a spendaholic, and Washington's not going to fix it. Come on. I am a spendaholic, and Washington's not going to fix it. Okay? You have to own your addiction, and we have to do something different. This is different. It's constitutional. It is inherently constitutional. It's exactly what our country needs. Now, my final point will be, what are you going to do about it? People ask me, I've done my political career, spent 16 years in Congress, ran for president a couple times, and here I am, right? In Wilkesboro, North Carolina. What are you doing here? Well, I served at the highest levels of government. I was the leadership. I sat in the White House, in the cabinet room, making decisions and about the direction of the country, and I had a lot to say about what was going on. Like I said, I ran for president. I think I wrote a book after the election called Blue Collar Conservative. I'm sure you've all read it. But it's a book I wrote in 2014. I wrote that book in 2014 saying the Republican Party is changing and we've got to get with it and develop an agenda for blue collar workers and manufacturers and energy producers so we can deal with the future economy and culture in our country. You know who read that book? I know, because he called me and asked me to come in and see him and talk to him about it. Donald Trump. Back in 2014. So, I wrote a book back in 2004 called It Takes a Family. I'm sure you've all read it. You know what that book talked about? That book talked about how the institutions of our country have been taken over by the left. Everything, except 2. I called it in the book, I called it the bigs versus the littles. Big business, big labor, big government, big Hollywood, big media, news media, big universities, big schools, public schools. All of the major institutions of the country by 2004 were controlled by the left. Now, this was a very controversial book back then. The only 2 institutions are left. The left is going to spend the next 20 years trying to destroy them. The church and the family. What's happened over the last 20 years? Okay, I'm just telling you, I'm no Nostradamus here, but I'm someone who sees reality and then tries to explain to people, you can sit on your butt and think things are going to get better by doing nothing, or you can actually look at what's there. I'm someone who has a gift. I believe my opponent when they say they want to do something. And I know what they want to do. They want to pack the court. They want to make Puerto Rico and D.C. a state. They want to pass election laws that will not allow Republicans to never win another election. They want to do that. They will do that. Oh no, they'll never. Yes, they will. And you can sit here and say, well, we can elect Donald Trump. Okay, for 4 years you get arrested until they get tired of Donald Trump because he's made enough people mad that they're going to vote for a Democrat in 4 years. Happened 4 years ago, probably happened 4 years from now. And they probably win the Senate. And then all those things happen, and you'll say, oh, why didn't we? I'm tired of being right. And nobody listening. Go back and read my books. Had the Republican Party listened to me in 2014 and 2012, because I wrote the book in 2014 about my 2012 race. But no, they chose Mitt Romney. And for all of you who voted for me instead of Mitt Romney in the primary, thank you. For all of you who didn't, I told you so. I'm just trying, like I said, tired of being right. I'm right on this one. We gotta fix this. That means you gotta do something. I'm doing this because I was in a position to make a difference and I failed. I wrote about it, I ran, I sacrificed my family, went through a lot, hard stuff. Not easy being in a family of a politician on a national stage. And I'm still sacrificing because I have to look at myself in the mirror and I have to realize that under my watch, America is on the verge of failure. Under my watch. And by the way, my watch is your watch. Because you're all about the same age I am, most of you. And so the question is, what are you going to do about it? I got a list of senators, you got them too. If you live in their districts, don't call them. Go see them. Go see Eddie. By the way, Eddie's not here tonight, but I'm meeting with Eddie for breakfast in the morning.
Awesome. Okay?
So kudos to give applause to Eddie Settle for naming up. That's important. Now, I don't know whether Eddie's going to vote for us or not, but I will tell you this. I have a lot of respect for a guy who's willing to listen and take it on, right? Yeah. So you got to respect people who do that. And so call your senators. You got a list of senators. I guarantee you, you know somebody in Beaufort County or someone in Union County or Iredell County or some of these counties where these legislators are, call them. And tell them to call their senators. Tell them to get their neighbors to call their senators. They need to hear from you. This is not on the top of their list of things they're concerned about. This is just not an issue that state legislators care about, because it's just not real to them right now. We're way far away from 34 states. And so it's just hard to get them excited about something. You have some visionaries, literally, visionaries, who understand what's at stake and are willing to put time and energy. Most are not. Most are just dealing with what's going on in the local water and sewer authority or whatever the case may be. There's local problems, property taxes, whatever it is. I get it, and that's important. But you got to get their attention to rise up, to look up, and see just a little bit over the horizon that there's a cliff there. And all these things they're worried about, they're not going to give a damn about. If this country goes into whatever could happen, whatever will happen. And so I encourage you to do what's necessary to help your country. I'm not asking you to put on a uniform. I'm asking you to carry a gun. I'm asking you to get in harm's way. I'm asking you to be a citizen. And do what citizens do, which is help save your country. Amen. You've got 6 weeks. That's it, 6 weeks. They're going to be back in session. And we're going to know in the Senate whether North Carolina becomes state number 20. And if North Carolina, I tell you, it's so much easier for me to go to Pennsylvania, or go to Iowa, or go to all these other states and say, North Carolina, a state that Donald Trump maybe wins by 1 or 2 points, and they'll win in your state by 20, and you can't pass it? So you guys are important. You're one of those key swing states, and when you guys speak, people listen. So speak loudly. God bless.
All right, thank you. I know we've kept you a little bit later. These guys will be around. If you haven't recorded a video, please feel free to do that. And really appreciate everyone coming out, and we're here if you have questions. Thank you.